You, Marc. How are you?
I'm doing well, Itamar. Thank you for having me.
Thank you so much for joining me today. There is a lot I want to discuss with you, so let's get started. Thank you for so many people who joined this session and for all the questions coming in. We'll try to answer as much as we can. So let's get started.
Sure. Hello, everyone.
Good. Perfect. So, looking at this year, there's, a lot of traction happening in the gaming business. I think someone told me there's more than 650 big deals announced, more than $100 billion of transactions, Activision, Blizzard Media, and Microsoft, Zynga and Take-Two, Sony and Bungie. A lot of changes, restructures. You're joining to Riot as president of games. How do you see all these changes? What does it mean for the industry? Maybe a few words on you, joining back.
Yeah, absolutely. I think one of the really exciting things about the game business in general is that it's sort of constantly the Wild West, where it's always changing and being disrupted, because it's an industry that sits at the intersection of so many different trends. Technology and content and sort of transmedia and now sports and all these different ways. And so whether it's new business model innovations or new platforms or new technologies which unlock different game experiences, it's always changing, which then means, of course, that there's a lot of opportunity in gaming. And of course, tailwinds are at our backs in the industry, meaning that the industry continues to grow and evolve. And the game business now has become, a really large, diverse industry that, has great content experiences and platforms, that are serving a lot of different player needs from all sorts of different backgrounds and types. And so, big corporations and tech firms and whatnot also, of course, are recognizing these trends and want to get exposure to this market growth. And, as the world just evolves to be more online, more remote, more digital, the companies that have the competencies to build engaging, interactive experiences online are game companies, not general tech companies and whatnot. And so, so I think that's one of the reasons that the competency of sort of building incredibly engaging experiences is so valued. Just as an example, Riot has done a couple small acquisitions. The way we've thought about that historically is, we're typically interested, we're not very acquisitive, all of our growth has been organic. But we've acquired 3 different teams, because we believe that the most scarce and valuable resource in gaming are incredible leaders, incredible teams capable of understanding a particular player need and, building a great experience to solve or to meet the needs of those players. And so, we bought a company a couple years ago called Radiant. We bought a small team as part of an acqui-hire called Jolly. The Radiant team is helping us build our fighting game. The team at Jolly helped us build Wild Rift. And we acquired Hypixel Studios as well. And so as it relates to why am I sort of back in a full-time operating role? I never really left. It was more taken on a founder role and doing a bunch of special projects and built our entertainment division. And as the company has continued to evolve, Brandon and I, we were sort of burning it at both ends for many years, and wanted to make it sustainable, so we needed to rebalance some things, in our personal lives, etc. And and so it's great to be able to focus on the creation of incredible content and great games, which is really the source of value creation for Riot, and that's what I love to do. And one thing that I learned over my career is to not only look at my calendar through the lens of what am I prioritizing and am I being productive, but also through the lens of how is my percent of time allocated to energy draining activities versus energizing activities. As Riot's footprint continued to grow and expand, sort of became an inch deep and a mile wide, and thought it was going to be better to be able to go deeper and focus on, again, the creation of incredible things.
I mean, what I find interesting looking at, this year, also the few years back, how gaming is being centralized from being more like a niche topic to more, becoming pop culture and mainstream, and many games, also your own games, are becoming more like of a social network and they play a bigger role in the broader entertainment than just, and being a game. So I think this will continue and to happen with the momentum from all these deals, and of course all the acceleration from COVID. Okay, so let's continue. I mean, there's a lot of conversations recently about cloud gaming and what LG are doing there and what Samsung are doing there. Like, how much do you believe that cloud gaming, number one, will disrupt the industry and be meaningful? And number two, how concrete is it, like short term?
Yeah, so as I briefly mentioned previously, the game industry can be disrupted by new technologies, and I do think that cloud gaming is one such technology. But that being said, because again, the industry is so diverse and large, and there's so many different player needs that different solutions need to be optimized to solve for. What tends to really happen is new innovations or new platforms oftentimes expand the growth rather than cannibalize other growth. And that's not, there are exceptions, of course, right? Like the predominance of arcades is obviously reduced compared to what it was in the 80s. But I think as it relates to cloud gaming, that's going to sort of grow over time and take a larger and larger share of sort of player hours. And obviously, there's a lot of great benefits that can come from cloud gaming, such as high-end experiences available on all sorts of different devices, without the need to install software. There's a lot of cool processing that can happen on the cloud. It can improve AI technology, and there's solutions that enable instant friend play, where you can sort of jump in, to a streamer that you watch, or pick up a save game, at a point to try a challenge, from some single player game. And there's a million different cool player experiences that can be designed by enterprising game teams. The challenge, of course, is that the technology is an enabler, but in it itself is necessary for those types of experiences, but insufficient. You also need an incredible team with a great, that has identified a particular player need and then has designed a great solution to solve that particular problem. And so I tend to think that, as an example, Google's pivot to being more of a technology enabler to content companies or game companies or publishers is the right strategy, compared to trying to build a sort of one-size-fits-all cloud gaming platform that would be sort of the equivalent of a Netflix, where you're just trying to consume games as part of a subscription service, based on the ability to play it all in the cloud. I think it's much more compelling to, again, rather unlock the potential for game developers to enhance their experiences for whatever game that they're trying to create through access to this massive infrastructure and cloud computing and technology. And I think that's how a lot of cloud gaming is going to show up over the next decade or so. But then long term, ultra long term, it's sort of hard to predict as time goes beyond a decade. And it could very well become the de facto standard as 5G and various other technologies become much more ubiquitous, and and the sort of ecosystem just looks different than it does today.
Yeah, I mean, Comcast are working on 10G now, right? So let's see how that will impact. I tried some of these platforms, and my take was that cloud gaming can disrupt console gaming in a similar way to what CTV did to cable linear television, from a perspective of the smart TV's hardware will replace the console hardware, and then you'll have the accessibility that mobile gaming has with the bigger screen, maybe better experience that the console platforms have today. But yeah, I guess we'll need to wait and see about that.
Just to react to that a little bit, I think that to a certain extent, I think the market will likely grow, and how much cannibalization will happen on, say, a console platform, I think is, there's smart people could disagree on. And part of the reason is, I think the most engaged and valuable segment of gamers, people who love games, who prioritize games as a meaningful part of their life, when you have a day off or whatnot, it's the primary thing you want to go do. are willing to pay to have a great premium device to ensure the best experience possible. And so, the part of the challenge and opportunity, of course, for cloud gaming companies, is how close can you get that experience from a performance standpoint? And part of the opportunity and challenge for the console companies is how do you stay ahead and add the value proposition to that super engaged audience to continue to ensure that those types of experiences that you could sort of only get with having a premium hardware device stay ahead. But again, like Microsoft is sort of hedging and doing both, and obviously making a huge investment in cloud, and I think that there's going to be probably advantages of having a bit of a shared ecosystem, as well as some trade-offs around going pure cloud or, of course, pure hardware. And so, I think that there will likely be, again, sort of a trend where cloud takes on more and more of the share over time. But I think it'll be a long time until it potentially fully replaces, because the tech bar and the experience bar is really high.
And I mean, I guess what we spoke in the beginning, the Sony Bungie acquisition, the Microsoft Activision deal, and then Take-Two looking at Zynga with mobile. I guess it's all somehow related from like a content play versus a cross-platform play. So yeah, very, very interesting. I mean, let's speak a bit about the intersectional, or maybe the broader like entertainment and where gaming sits there. We still have gaming IPs, becoming more popular, like in television and film, with the Sonic movie, and of course your own Arcane and the huge success on Netflix there. And like, just curious to ask you, how does like you, or maybe Route in general, treat those different audiences and different screens, and like, because there's a lot of similarity to your characters and what's happening from the gaming perspective, but still it's a more passive experience and watching like a series than being active and playing. So just curious about that.
Yeah, absolutely. Riot's mission is to be the most player-focused game company in the world, and what that means to us and to every Rioter is that we try to make it better to be a player. And when we think about how you can make it better to be a player, that of course means innovation in gameplay, but or the quality experience. But it doesn't end there. There's service components, there's business model components, there's IP components, and so the reason, like, I think if you were to boil down, why has any or all of this sort of innovation from Riot, where has it come from? I think it's really come from that lens of sort of working backwards from understanding the player perspective and thinking about, like, wouldn't it be cool if? And so, like, part of the reason we invested so heavily in esports and built this great ecosystem is we've always thought about esports as a feature of League of Legends or a feature of Valorant, where it enhances the experience of being a League or Valorant player, because there's this great pro ecosystem. You can always have something to watch and talk about, and you can learn a lot from watching. And and that is similar to how we think about it from a music perspective, or from why we invested in sort of building the animation pipeline to create an incredible show like Arcane. Because when a player spends hours and hours and hours or years, right, just attached to a particular game, loving these characters, immersing themselves in this world, oftentimes, and in the case of League as an example, it's a pretty inaccessible game for most people, right? It's a competitive multiplayer online game, and that just means that it's not a game for everybody, and that's okay. But we've happened to invest a lot in creating these really cool characters, again, that a lot of our players really love. And a competitive multiplayer game is not the best storytelling vehicle either. But our players are curious about, well, who are these characters and where do they come from and how do they relate to each other and what's that world like? Because we've done a lot of this world building, for other games and for future things. And so we hoped to demonstrate, with what we were trying to do with Arcane, that these characters, these champions that players have built this relationship with over many years, are real, and they have real relationships, and they matter, and their world is real and compelling. And scripted entertainment is still an incredible, if not the best, storytelling vehicle. And so, the part of the challenge, though, is obviously our players' expectations for what a great show would be was an incredibly high bar, because that was set by companies that have been building scripted TV or film for many, many, many years. And so part of our challenge was, how do we create something great? Because, from a business standpoint, doing something like the first thing that a player would do, league player, when they heard about Arcane or animated series, like, oh my God, please don't screw it up. And because their expectations or hopes are really high, and so it would be in a medium that they can share it more easily than they can share their joy with the competitive multiplayer online game. And so they want to bring their friend, boyfriend, girlfriend, mom, dad, sister, brother, whoever, be like, hey, come watch this thing with me. I know you're not into it. You don't need to know anything about League in order to enjoy it. And hopefully we don't embarrass our players, right? We make it worth their time. And that was always the bar for us. And the team was really motivated to try to figure out how to make that happen. And it's been obviously incredibly delightful to do that, to sort of exceed our players' expectations. And just in the same way that we always thought about esports, again, enhances ecosystem, to us, elevating the IP, elevating the characters, elevating the world, to feel like it's worth our fans' time and investment is something that is a long-term investment that can sort of enrich and deepen the experience. And so a lot of what's interesting, though, is a lot of studios, we're in LA, it's a lot of movie studios over time would be like, hey, let's make a League movie. And when we'd say, well, why do you want to make a League movie? They'd say, well, because the intern says it's cool and it's big. And, we'd be like, okay, well, and they'd be like, we make some incredible movies, check out these. And they'd also be like, well, we'd be like, you also make some movies that are not so great or whatnot. And so, we thought it was really important to protect the integrity of the IP and the world. And that's one of the reasons that it's also so cool that, Christian, Link, and Alex Eve were the two showrunners and writers from Riot that, created the show, had never written a page of TV before in their life. And until we sent them to a TV writing seminar in 2015. But they have a lot of passion, talent, love, understanding of our characters. And we needed to augment that heart and capability with the right expertise and craft execution. And that's been a lot of Riot's secret sauce over time, is finding the balance of, production value and craft expertise, but marrying it with that player perspective. And to sort of circle back to answer your question more directly, the way, with the success of something like Arcane, or with, say Sonic the Hedgehog 2 or whatnot, what's great is if you think about the sort of like a conversion funnel, where part of how we think about it is like an IP affinity funnel, where a new medium or a different medium like Arcane will expose the League of Legends universe to a much broader audience than can enjoy it, or that does enjoy it, as a multiplayer online battle arena PC game, or Wild Rift, on mobile or whatnot. And so we don't have a great way currently of really engaging with those players, but because they've had a great impression, they're like, wow, they now will oftentimes, maybe that game is really cool, even if it's not for me. And the next time Riot does a thing, or as our portfolio expands and we have a broader universe, or games or merchandise or various things that can, or books or whatnot, that can engage those types of fans, maybe they'll be more likely to do it. And so, we've always tried to align our interests as a company with that of our players and our audience, where we believe that if we do something great for them, over the long term, that will create the conditions where if we have a business model or a product line that people want to spend money on because they're excited about it or they're proud of it, they will do it. And so we're always trying to sort of, again, find those win-win-win alignment of interest scenarios. But it starts with the creation of great things. And I think if this is, a trend that you're just going to see over and over, because I think that there's been a lot of proof points now that gaming IP, is no longer something to be embarrassed about. There's incredible storytelling, and again, not just within scripted entertainment or film, but also in games themselves. And there's some incredible companies that that make incredible games that are great storytelling vehicles as well. And so I think that the more companies that do those types of things, that deliver great experiences, it also just elevates our medium in a way where a broader audience can appreciate the craftsmanship and the artistry that goes into it, which is also then helpful for players because there's less stigma attached with people choosing to engage in it deeply. And many of us who have spent a lot of time playing games and love games deeply have often felt that stigma from various aspects of society being like, why are you wasting your time on this thing that has no value? And so we think that part of making it better to be a player is helping other people negatively judge the thing that they love less as well.
I mean, I was fascinated by how Riot almost invented itself and became relevant to to a broader audience, was made an impact in for other audiences and from a broader entertainment perspective. So that was, I was following it from far away. So yeah, so interesting to see, because I was thinking only on one side and not on the other side of the effect of you doing that. So that's interesting. Let's maybe, speak a bit about so we spoke about, gaming is becoming a pop culture and gaming is everywhere and it's in TV and it's in the cloud and in big gaming deals. Maybe a bit about how gaming as an advertising medium is. We saw in the last few years, and of course with COVID, there was a lot of acceleration around that because there was no out of home interaction. So it was more of a digital gaming focused thing for marketers. A lot of brands started to take gaming more seriously from an advertising medium perspective. If we see the numbers of how many people play games, consumer time spent in gaming, and comparing to TV or channels that have a lot of ad dollars already allocated there, and then also the companies like Xbox and PlayStation start to speak more about monetization and incorporating brand and content. So just curious, from someone who was who comes from the hardcore gaming and is very protective for the community and the audiences, how do you see brands starting to to look at gaming as a media frontier?
Yeah, well, to your point, I think potential sponsors and advertisers, and of course tech companies, platforms, and companies like Anzu, of course, have recognized that the amount of engagement from players is incredibly high, and in the media mix in general, in terms of if I'm a company, how do I get my message in front of people who are of a particular demo that would, I think, like the thing that I'm creating or all about, or I want them to hear my message or whatnot. There's a lot of people who, from a large percentage of their media consumption time, are really focused on gaming and or gaming in sort of adjacent channels like Twitch or YouTube, content or centered around gaming, etc. As opposed to so TV or various other forms of traditional media or newspapers or other mediums. And so just within the Riot ecosystem, as an example, we have over 3 billion hours of monthly player engagement just in game. So not including the subreddit of just League of Legends is I think it's one of the largest subreddits in the world. It's got 6 million subscribers or something, and or not including esports or not including sort of conversation around game in different parts of the world. And so that's a lot of attention. And what was fascinating was when we first were building esports and launching it, we, of course, the ad market was really nascent. Everyone was incredibly skeptical that it could be a thing. And so we didn't have any ads. And our players were actually asking us to please put in ads because they're like, we love this esports stuff. Please don't have it stop. We're worried that you're going to lose money, and things like that. And so players also want advertising when it doesn't degrade the experience, but in fact it can enhance it. And I think well-executed sponsorships do a great job of that, and depending on the type of game, right? If you think of a Need for Speed or sort of, a NASCAR style racing game or whatnot, or various real life, simulation sandbox games or shooters or whatnot, there's all sorts of different opportunities for real world brands to connect in a meaningful way. Just in say, Hollywood for a long period of time, or great product placement, Omega and James Bond, right? Or, whatever, example everybody can sort of think of at the top of mind, actually adds value, not only to the brand, but to the experience of the user. And so therefore, that's one of the beliefs that we have that have led to the types of sponsorships we've explored on the esports side. Like we view it as our responsibility to help them understand our audience and the types of things that would, come across potentially as tone deaf, for the audience, or sort of inauthentic. And so, like the quality of integrations matters a great deal. And I think that that's true even when you have the sort of algorithmically generated ad platform as well. And so that's one of the reasons it's so helpful to have tools and with a lot of parameters where you can, help manage the experience to ensure that, you're not breaking the immersion, but in fact, you're enhancing the immersion. And so one of the challenges of having a fantasy game, like League of Legends, in the world of Runeterra, is, if we, of course, tried to put some ads and, in Summoner's Rift, like that would break immersion, it would undermine the IP, our players would be like, they'd cringe, it wouldn't be cool. But that doesn't mean, again, that within different parts of the ecosystem, there aren't thoughtful, effective ways to help add value to players and to advertisers. And there's, a variety of different companies, of course, which have experimented with having digital content that is now sponsored by, brands and whatnot, where you can, this item today brought to you at a discount by this company. And they're like, wow, thank you. There's all sorts of cool, creative things you can do when thoughtful and tasteful in the execution. And again, I think that just given the growing mix of gaming engagement hours and sort of the around game experiences, it's just a more and more important channel for advertisers and brands to really understand and participate in, and why, we're a believer in sort of the overall advertising component, if thoughtfully executed, because we can all also think about, examples of where it hasn't gone well or it sort of, harmed things. But I think that hopefully the industry continues to learn and evolve and improve, which I think is happening. And so, so I just think that it's going to be a segment that's going to continue to grow over time.
In the early days of American sport, there was green screens in the stadium instead of brand and content. Today, it's almost part of the culture. We wait for the Super Bowl to see the ads in the like in the breaks there. So yeah, definitely, I believe gaming will have a similar route like over the years, because if you think about it, a lot of games trying to clone real world environments, brand and content is just part of the culture, how we are, interacting with brands in the physical world. So of course makes sense. Let's maybe now dive a bit deeper to in-game advertising. That's of course what we do in Anzu. Also, Marc, you in person invested in Anzu. And we in the last 5 years, what we're trying to do in Anzu is, balance between the art of the game and making the game more realistic. We call it letting gamers play versus allowing brands to communicate in a positive way with a wide range of audiences. Some of them are hard to reach in other platforms. Of course, they're very brand safe environment. How do you see specifically in-game advertising? And maybe you want to say a few words about the investment in Anzu.
Yeah, so to me, it sort of ties to what I was just talking about, where I think that, one, just from a macro perspective, given the amount of engagement, there's clearly an opportunity. But again, it doesn't mean that there's sort of a one-size-fits-all perfect solution. I think each game needs to be sort of thoughtfully and deliberately curated to ensure that the advertising, again, I think great execution, looks like it enhances the in-game experience, where it sort of elevates it for players, and where players will feel good and appreciative of the brands, or it enhances the realism in some ways, rather than feeling like it's exploitive or sort of cheapens the experience. Granted, but for certain types of games, say, various, mobile games that have a very different business model or whatnot, again, I think that, somebody mentioned in chat, having ads and loading screens, right? Like there are also ways that, certain companies can find ways to enhance value to players by leveraging advertising to then not have players pay directly, right? Which of course can also feel good for players. And so like one of my favorite stories or experiences that I've ever had with a player personally, was I was speaking at an MBA class at Anderson, which is UCLA. We're in LA, it's close by, and this is maybe 6 years ago. And after speaking in class, this woman came up to me and she just said, "Hey, I just wanted to say thank you. Because I've been playing League for 7 years, and I've never spent $1 in the game because I'm a poor college student, and and so long story short, she made these dolls, one the Tryndamere doll and an Ash doll, Ash named after my wife, Ashley, and she just essentially, she was just grateful for being able to have hundreds of hours or thousands of hours of engagement. She said all her friends that she made at UCLA were because of this game, and it was enabled, like the interaction in the community, because the game was free. And when we had a conversation afterwards and we were talking about that and how she never had to spend $1, but she even said, it was just sort of amazing that she was like, and like it made me wish that you guys had ads in the game, or there were like other things that I could do to to help the company, because she felt grateful for the amount of value that she was getting, despite the fact that she never paid anything. And I think that, again, when thoughtfully applied, just like I mentioned on the esports example previously, it's like that sentiment is true, for an awful lot of players. And so I think as long as companies and brands are looking at in-game advertising and or sponsorship, through a sort of curated lens to enhance the player experience, there's a lot of value to unlock that is a win for players, a win for the company, and a win for the brands that want to reach these players in authentic ways. And I think that's at least how we think about it. And I believe that there's an awful lot of game developers and advertisers that are similarly or have a similar approach and perspective. And so, but to your point too, justifying the creation of an ad platform from a technology standpoint as a developer that has limited resources and you're always trying to add features is something that was very difficult to prioritize because it's a massively complex business, and building the relationships with advertisers and the whole sales force and all that, and curating all the ads. And so, I think that there's a lot of value for a platform like an Anzu that can manage that process in a thoughtful, effective way with great technology that can sort of be the bridge between, advertisers and sponsors and game companies. And of course, the companies themselves need to manage that well as well. But, absent that, your tech platform, for many companies and many games, they wouldn't be able to capture the opportunity to deliver that type of value to the audience that they're trying to serve.
I mean, for me, it's about this win-win-win versus lose-lose-lose, right? So, let's take, for example, what happened in the open web, right? So the ad experience was horrible. People started to use ad blockers, and then Forbes.com started to block people using ad blockers. So they're creating good content, but it's not accessible because of like this lose-lose in the industry. Versus we're hearing from a lot of game developers in mobile and PC and Roblox, where putting the ads not only gave them this new revenue model, but actually increased engagement like in the game, because now it's like it's cooler and it looks better. And 15 years ago, Mercedes had a business model that gaming companies were paying Mercedes and Daimler to be allowed to use the Mercedes content in the game to give the game more credibility. Now, fast forward 15 years, I have a company telling these brands, you need to pay to be in the game instead of you need to charge to be in the game. So I think this change in perception of gaming is really interesting to see that. And also, like, I really like what you said about there's no one size fits all. I mean, Roblox recently announced their immersive advertising, pilot, where their in-game ads are a bit different. For them, it's about, like a portal to move between experiences and to buy items in the game. So like a very different use case of a similar concept. So I'm sure we'll see more of these different like creative implementations over the years. So definitely something I'm curious to see how that plays. I mean, we don't have a lot of more time. There's like tons of questions from people. So first, thank you for all the participants and all the requests. I'll try to answer as much as I can. Marc and myself will just speak very, very fast so we cover more topics. But let's maybe speak a few minutes about, there's a lot of buzz and content on the metaverse and Web3 and crypto and blockchain. Some people tell me it's fraud, and some people tell me it's the most important thing in video games from the mobile smartphone launch. So and then there's platforms like Sandbox and Decentralized who are getting a lot of attention in very high company valuations and big investor caches. How do you see this technology? Is Riot doing anything that you can speak about in the space? Just curious to pick your brain on this.
Yeah, so I think our perspective on the metaverse is, first, it is quite impressive how the underlying technological infrastructure, both from a hardware and software perspective, have evolved to such a state to enable the conversation for the metaverse to even happen in a serious way. Because it's true, right, that theoretically, there are the mechanisms to be able to create these really, these online worlds that everybody can participate in, and different brands can participate in, and companies, and simulate reality, all sorts of things. That being said, I think we're a little bit of contrarian as it relates to the metaverse, in that we tend to take the perspective that the most important thing with any type of online experience or social media experience in general is, well, what does that player need? Why should I participate in this thing? And if you think back to Second Life, as an example, which again was a very impressive technology and experience, especially for its day. I think that when pressed from the player experience or user experience perspective, or what's different about today, there's this really chicken and egg problem that metaverse platforms have, which is, well, you need the content to be on the platform to then be sufficiently engaging for then players to want to come participate in it, and solve these interesting use cases. And I think that a lot of times there is a bit of the technology in search of a solution, rather than a need that's being actively solved. But as time goes on to infinity, I'm 100% a believer that there will be these competing metaverse platforms, and you'll have Meta, and you may have Epic's and Tim Sweeney's version, and I really agree also philosophically with how Tim talks about it in terms of trying to come up with standards and make it ubiquitous and all that. But of course, the company that sort of wins from a standards perspective or helps have a component infrastructure will obviously do very well to the extent that situation comes to manifest. And so when you compare it Roblox to Meta to Engage, embedding Unreal into Fortnite and all that. Obviously, there's this sort of opportunity for user-generated content to make pretty compelling experiences. But just like with YouTube or Twitch or whatnot, in all UGC platforms, the cream always still rises to the top, where a very, very, very small percentage of content ends up being the lion's share of the value that people actually want to go engage with. And so if you believe that that's true, right, then again, I think that there are sort of implications for for companies that aspire to participate in the metaverse. So Riot example, just to be clear, we're not doing anything as it relates to the metaverse, unless you consider building very engaging, competitive online or compelling online worlds a metaverse, right? I have played many MMOs for my whole life, whether it's Ultima Online or Dragon Realms and text-based MUDs, Tellarena 5.0 or EverQuest and World of Warcraft and whatnot. And I think those are incredibly engaging, compelling online worlds that I love to run around in and do things with friends. And that's a particular use case that I understand and relate to deeply. And we're trying to build a next-gen MMO, and it's a very hard problem, based in the world of Runeterra. And and again, that makes sense to me, and I think to many players. And so that isn't to therefore say that the metaverse can't ever really take off. But I think for the next sort of 5-10 years, I imagine that the way that it's going to keep manifesting is there will be these sort of walled garden competing platforms that have compelling UGC content offerings. And we're not going to get to a place of a ubiquitous standards, snow crash-esque metaverse. Maybe that'll happen over the longer term, but I think we're a ways away from that. And so anyway, I know you talked about crypto and NFTs and all these adjacent concepts also. And to the extent it's relevant, my quick 2 cents on crypto is like I don't invest in cryptocurrency speculation. I do think that blockchain is a transformational technology and is incredibly compelling, and it makes lots of inefficient markets far more efficient. Like if you imagine, like if I'm a developing nation and I was seeking to create a civil society or service with ownership, or like applying Bitcoin, or sorry, not Bitcoin, blockchain, like fractional ownership to real estate, would be incredibly transformational. You cut out lots of middlemen in a way that's much more efficient for the, end user, et cetera. And so I think that there's a lot of great use cases, but crypto, because it's an unregulated market, oftentimes what happens is if you're not an insider, you're therefore an outsider. And you're subject to the whims of volatility of market manipulation, which big concentrated holders actively do. And so my 2 cents everybody is buyer beware as it relates to that. And then as it relates to NFTs, at least from the Riot perspective, we again are always seeking to add value to players in ways that really make sense. And so we're cautious about ever doing something there unless there's a clear player value proposition that really makes sense, because we would never want to be in a situation where we're exploiting our audience.
I mean, Marc, I have a lot to say or to comment on what you said. Maybe that's another hour in a different time. So I'll try to summarize 3 main maybe comments on what you said, and then we move to some questions from the audience. So number one, I think it's important to take things into perspective. Roblox versus, let's take, for example, Sandbox, a very popular metaverse platform. Like Sandbox has 0.01% of the Roblox user base. I think it's important to remember where things are today. I would argue that your company is a metaverse company more than even the crypto and VR companies, because maybe in the future, Meta and VR will do amazing things. I think if we see the metaverse as a digital twin of the physical platform where, it's accessible, we socialize, we spend time. I think by all these definitions, League of Legends is more than a metaverse than most of the other new technologies that you mentioned. I had an interesting conversation the other day with the chief marketing of Snap, and he was telling me, by the definitions of the metaverse, Snapchat is not metaverse because we're doing AR. It's not like, it's enhancing. So they say we love the physical world, we want to enhance it versus to replace it. But I believe that what he said, we're more metaverse than most other companies claiming they're metaverse. I think also it's important not to too much, give focus on the definition versus the value and what, in the scale. If for some audiences the chat of Call of Duty is more popular than WhatsApp, then by all means, that's a metaverse platform, right? So that's something that's at least how I see it. So let's start with some audience questions. So a lot of questions about in-game advertising and this. So I don't want to step on our next webinar session where we'll speak about the new IAB and MRC advertising standards and what it means for Anzu, what it means for the broader advertising industry. So I'll keep that for the next panel and next webinar. I want to focus, Marc, because there's a lot of questions about the metaverse and the future of Riot, maybe from different angles than what we spoke. So maybe let me pick some of these things. There's a lot of questions about the future of like Arc Season 2 and where League of Legends goes, and like 2023, maybe any sneak peek you can give the audience here?
Yeah, well, so one, Arcane Season 2 it's crazy, so it's like hold on to your seats, like it's when it's ready, it'll be there, and I think hopefully we won't disappoint. The team's really working hard to try to even exceed the bar from last season. And so thank you for the interest there. One of the things that's crazy cool about League of Legends is, we're 13. I guess we launched at the end of 2009, and the game is it's doing incredibly well still. For many years in, and we sort of bucked a lot of the trends around the traditional sort of product life cycle, and I think there's a lot of reasons for that I think are interesting, but it's in particular always sort of trying to keep player at the center of our decision making, the long-term service-oriented model, always improving. In a lot of ways, if we were to think about games traditionally in terms of like the package goods SKU-oriented model, we probably already created like League of Legends 2 and 3 and 4 and 5, by iterating and evolving and adding features and new content and changing things and all that. But there's a lot of ongoing investment and efforts and whatnot. And the durability update that happened last year has really helped, I think, improve the core gameplay also. And then we're going to remake the client. There's lots of cool stuff happening. We're never resting on our laurels there. And for those that happen to be Valorant players or check it out, we just had our Valorant champions this past weekend, in Istanbul, and it was super cool. And anyway, lots of cool stuff happened in the Riot ecosystem. But I think in a similar way to rewind a couple of years ago, when players, many people thought we were just the League of Legends company, and we were working on a lot of stuff behind the scenes. That is still true. There's actually a lot of stuff that we're working on that has yet to see the light of day that we're excited to get in front of everybody too, with our current games, but also with future games.
I mean, you mentioned Istanbul. I'm such of a big fan of the gaming entrepreneurship Turkey market, and they did so well in hyper casual games, and looks like they're trying to grow to more more complicated game graphics. Definitely hope that will play well. I mean, I'll try to maybe bundle some questions from different topics. So Marc, a lot of indie developers are asking about, on the one side, tips for Web3 creation, even though you're not active there from a game design perspective, but also from like a business model perspective, or maybe broadly business models for indie developers. So any two cents on that?
Yeah, so my quick 2 cents is, I think that the best, first of all, there's never been a better time to be a game developer. Like the way that the technology has evolved, tools, and how ubiquitous it is now to be able to create great content. Like rewind 10, 15, 20 years ago, a lot of these experiences that people would want to make were locked behind really difficult technology creation. And, because of Unreal and Unity and, AWS and, evolving tools and Steam, all sorts of things, the ability to be a small team and create a great game and, ship it to players, on all these different channels, that's really a great thing. So I think what's happening in the industry is that there's sort of this hollowing out of the middle, unfortunately, which to a certain extent is a bit of a challenge from a player standpoint. But so if I were a game entrepreneur, it's like you either go really big and you try to go compete at the ultra premium high end, where there's going to be fewer companies capable of creating those types of experiences, or you go small and you try to have a small team where you can manage your costs effectively and you can still do something great. Leverage like Hades, leveraging early access and sort of iterating to get the game right, and leveraging third-party platforms, and so and just as it relates to the business model, I do think trying to align the interests of your company with that of your players is really, really important. And a lot of people mistakenly assume that Riot is a free-to-play company. That's not the case. We have only created games that happen to be free but that's because we believe that's the best business model for the type of experience we've been creating. We have no qualms with doing a different business model, such as including selling a box, right, to the extent that that's what actually made sense for that type of content or that experience. And so we don't think it's the right approach to force a business model on top of a particular game experience that isn't designed for it. So that's what those some quick advice for.
I mean, and we still a lot of AAA games, it took them many more years than your company to move from like a paid game to free to play. We see a lot of pressure around loot boxes and regulations around, is it gambling? Should it be regulated? Or even things like, like from buying physical discs to move to like a digital buy that, removes some of the barrier to entrance for smaller developers that now don't need to sell, like in physical shops, right? So I think, yeah, I mean, the changes in the business model side with things like you said, like Unreal and Azure will definitely be very meaningful. I mean, I have a question. Only two people asked it, but I'm in person. Like I was interested about sustainability in the advertising world. I can tell you it's a big topic around carbon free and like having more awareness about like these things, and great companies are educating the markets. I didn't hear a lot in the gaming space about that. Like, what's your take on that?
Yeah, so I think you're going to see more companies in the gaming space pay attention to sustainability. Riot has announced through our Karma team, which is our philanthropic arm, where we often will help engage our players in meaningful causes, and we've raised an awful lot of money, that we can apply to different, important causes that are meaningful to players around the world. And just, mental health is a big one. Sustainability is another. And so Riot is, actively building plans to, achieve a carbon neutral footprint by, I believe, 2030. And so, I think you're going to see more companies pay attention to that because we're all in this together. We're all on Team Earth, and we need to all be responsible stewards.
Yeah. Going to a very different topic. We have a few minutes left. You spoke a bit about business model, like in the pure gaming. There's some questions about, like esports in tournaments, and, sponsorships are very popular. Do you see other business model starting to take play in those environments?
Yes. So one of the areas that we're exploring and sort of experimenting with, also is, to the point around win-win-win, but how do we leverage the content creator ecosystem where we can help them generate sustainable revenue, whether it's pro players or streamers or whatnot too. Can we help them, have them sell some of our digital items, and this, and sort of enabling some entrepreneurship. And so if they do that, they can do well. And we actually launched a game in China as our first market, which is essentially League Esports Manager. So if you know Football Manager, where you're a manager of a football club, well, you can be a manager of a League of Legends esports team. And we share a lot of the revenue from that with our players and pros and teams. And so it's oftentimes like, you can have a game made as a sport, and then now you can have a game made of playing a game as a sport, as a manager. So it's quite meta, but it's actually doing incredibly well, and players really love it, and our fans, our pros love it, and the esports ecosystem loves it. And so, we're going to be looking to figure out if we can or should bring it to other parts of the world. But I think there's a lot of opportunity to do exactly what you're talking about, which is, again, experiment with different business models to help nurture the growth of ecosystems in a healthy way.
Yeah. I mean, Phil, like Spencer, the boss of Xbox, was speaking about the diversity in the business model with, Game Pass and subscription and prepaid and free and advertising and purchases. So yeah, it's exactly that.
Well, and to your point, we've recently announced a partnership with Microsoft and Xbox, where we're now going to be giving players the option in a couple months, across the Riot gaming ecosystem to connect their account to Xbox. And one of the things that's interesting is, in Korea, where League of Legends is roughly like 50% market share in the PC bong ecosystem. We drive a lot of business to PC cafes by doing sponsorships and giving players benefits, tournaments and all sorts of cool things. So they want to play in a PC bong, but when you're playing in a PC bong, maybe because you don't have a machine at home or whatnot too, you've got to rent the machine. And so Riot actually makes slightly more money because we do get a rev share with the PC bong owners, and that's another example of a win-win-win. And our Xbox partnership is an exploration, or we're attempting to see, can we have a similar situation where Xbox benefits because they want to continue to grow their platform, we don't view ourselves as a platform. We view ourselves as a content ecosystem, sort of a curated great ecosystem. So we want to go where our players are, whether it's PC bongs, whether it's Xbox, whether it be PlayStation, whether it's, any type of partnership where we can enhance the value, where everybody can win. That's what we're trying to do.
Big challenge, I guess. Okay, last question, last minute. It just came now. Like AAA games in the Olympics, yes or no?
I think as time goes on to infinity, yes. One of the big challenges is, the spirit of the Olympic Games appropriately is, it's not about professional sports, sort of amateur sports and whatnot. And also it's not about commerce, right? Obviously, they make a lot of money from advertising and whatnot, and broadcast rights, and, to sustain and make a great, event. But games are owned properties by corporations. And so I think one of the big tension points and challenges to figure out, even though obviously there's a lot of demand from the viewership engagement standpoint, people love, like we've done, we've been in the Asian games as an example, is what could that look like? And, because, the last thing we'd ever want to do is dishonor the spirit of what the Olympics is all about.
Yeah.
And so, there are some challenges to overcome there, but, I do think that as the 21st century continues to plug on, it's not a question of if, but when, interactive entertainment comes into the Olympics in a meaningful way.
I mean, my last sentence on this is, it's important to remember that those decentralized platforms have, private venture capital investors behind them, right? So that's also going to be an interesting play between being fully decentralized to who's behind it with, the cash and in the P&L. And Marc, thank you so much. I enjoyed it a lot. If you were available, let's do another one next week. Yeah.
Yeah, thanks, Itamar. Appreciate it. And thanks everybody for being here. Have a great day. Hope you enjoyed it.
Speak soon, everyone, and see you in the next Anzu Talks webinar series.